Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today we're working on this AT. That's my cat in the background. There she is again. Using the AT-M6, kind of like an AT-AT, but not. I had a Bondi model of it because I got it super cheap, so I decided to use it for this. There was a lot of firsts on this for me. I wanted to try some weathering out that I haven't done before. I also used chipping medium for the first time with very mixed results. I used pigments for the first time and made my own pigments for the first time. So really exciting for me to do this. I'm not super happy with the results. You just saw them, so you can decide for yourself. But I definitely see a lot of things I could have improved on in this one. So let's just hop into it. Let's get started on it, and you guys can see how it went. So let's crack open our AT-M6 kit here. Yes, I know, it's not an AT-AT. Disney killed Star Wars. Everything new Star Wars sucks. Cool. This is a sweet model, and it made for a cool diorama. Crack it open here. We got 4 sprues. Very simple kit to put together, but a ton of detail in these small pieces. This kit is super cool. I got a couple other kits in this same line that I'm really excited about now because this kit is awesome. Look at all the detail in this headpiece here, just super cool. Cut all the pieces out of the sprues and just kind of started plopping them together, see how it went together, and seeing how I could utilize this. The whole scheme for this was going to be battle damaged, so I'm going to start cutting things up. I'm cutting this right around the joint, figuring, no, if this was shot down and fell over, the joint would probably be the weak point. I feel like that's the point it would break, so I'm going to go ahead and clip this. And then I'm just kind of placing it as if it was shot down and fell over, kind of get an idea of how that would look. And then I cut out a little styrofoam base that I was going to use for this. Once I got the model placed where I wanted it, I just took a pencil and marked it out on the base in all the spots that were actually touching the base, because I was going to have to carve them out so that this looked like it actually fell into the sand. Once I had that done, I just grabbed a knife and started carving away. Start chiseling out, prying this out. It doesn't have to be neat or clean or anything. It's meant to be holes where the AT-M6 fell, and you know, kind of drag the sand with it. Oh, this is going to be on sand, by the way. Yeah, so we're shutting out, and then I'm just going to test fit it as I'm going here. And right here I can see that it's a little too tall. I need it to sink in a little bit more. So I'm going to end up carving some more out, but I just test fit it all, kind of keep going so I can get an overall look of what it's like. And then I'm marking over where I wanted to cut some more out, and then chisel out some more parts. More test fitting as I'm doing this. I'm trying this over and over again just to see where it is. Do I need to go down more? Do I need to cut more here, cut more there? And eventually I got it to here, which is where I liked it. And later I find out that I really should have carved down a little bit farther. And here's why. So we're gonna use some Mod Podge, some of this super fine sand, and a little bit of water in the mixture as well. And we're gonna put this all over the base, and this is gonna give us that kind of classic Star Wars sand planet feel on top of it. Poured some Mod Podge in there. I don't have a ratio for this or anything, and then I just poured some sand in there and a little bit of water on top of that just to make it a little bit easier to spread, not quite so thick, and went and mixed it up. It was a little too watery here. I needed a little more texture in there. So just add a little more sand and get into a mixture that you like. You know, you might end up putting it on here and finding out that you need to add more, and that's fine. You just go back and add more until you get a mixture that you like. Put some Pizza Hut ads down so you don't make a huge mess, and then just kind of start taking your stick here and spackling it on. I also grabbed a nasty brush here, a cheap brush, and used that to kind of spread it around. And that did help me cover some more of the area quickly, but I ended up going back over with the stick and smoothing some areas out, adding some areas here and there, and getting the look that I liked. Then I just cleaned off the sides of the base here and let it all dry and harden. While that was drying, I started working on the battle damage. So the points where I cut it and where things were broken, I just took this little sanding stick and started sanding some grooves into it. I also knew that where it was broken, I thought maybe it'd be cool to add some pieces of wire that would make it look like they were kind of ripped out when the joint broke. So I took this little joint piece here, and then just with my hand, because it's really soft plastic, use a drill bit and put some holes in here that I was going to glue some little bits of wire into it. So I'm just using this kind of, craft wire. You can find this anywhere. Cut a few pieces off, and then I was going to glue these into the holes that I drilled. Now, there's a lot of me fiddling around with this and trying to get this to glue that I cut out like an embarrassing amount. But basically, I ended up doing this, and then it fell out over and over again. And once I used some setting spray, I managed to get it. But yeah, this was a very fiddly part. I used some thick gel super glue to help me out, but God, it was fiddly. Worth it though. I think it adds a nice, cool little touch. You can't see it that well in the finished product, but it was cool, and I'm glad that I took the time to do it. So I do trim them down a little bit from that. They're a little long there. Now I'm trying to place all this stuff on here after it dries and hardens, and this is where I found one of the first big mistakes that I made. I needed to make the holes bigger and deeper to account for the space that the sand material took up when it was hardened. I didn't do that. So everything is kind of raised up here, as you can see, and it's just not sitting right. So I ended up having to refit the whole thing. As you can see, I'm making a few more cuts here and like just rearranging the whole thing and adjusting how it was going to sit in there. It all worked out in the end, but it definitely is something that I could have accounted for early on. Now to get that Star Wars sand color, I started with this red-brown primer, and then some of this flat flesh color from Vallejo on top, and then in the recesses, I airbrushed in a little bit of light rust. Then I used some Citadel Reichland Flesh Shade to sort of blend in the areas here, and then I ended up really liking that color more than the actual color that I had, so I covered the whole area, the whole light sand colored area in the shade. Starting this project, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go with the newer Star Wars, really rich, deep orange sand, or a more classic sort of tan sand from the older movies, and as you can see, I went with the tan color. I don't have any footage of this, but as you can see really quickly, I drilled some blaster holes into the side of the AT-M6. Super easy with a small drill or a Dremel. Then we blasted this with some primer and then some gun alloy, which is basically just a metallic silver from Minotaur. After that, some chipping medium, which I had a really hard time spraying. Now I tried spraying this out of an airbrush and I wasn't thinning it because I don't know what the chemical makeup of was it, and I was afraid to thin it with something and have it not function as a chipping medium. So I was spraying it straight out of the bottle here, and I just couldn't get it to come out really well, even though it's very, very thin. It's very watery thin. Maybe if I was using a nicer airbrush, I didn't want to use a nice airbrush on this stuff either, it would have come out better. So if you have any tips, let me know in the comments. Greatly appreciated. And I'm going to show a clip after this of me trying to chip this stuff and having a really hard time with it. So as you can see, I ended up having to use a pretty stiff, large oil painting brush with really stiff bristles to try and actually get this paint chipped off. And of course you have to activate it with water as well. Toothpick worked as well, but it was just not as easy as I thought it would be. Maybe that's just how it works. I don't know. After that, you need to put a gloss varnish on that to protect it. I used gloss because I was going to do some washes on it. You could do a matte varnish if you wanted to. This is also my first time making oil washes, so I used just a tiny, tiny dab of the black oil paint here from Gamlin, and then I used some GAMS oil, just, you know, mineral spirits, odorless, in there until I got this kind of watery texture. And I have no idea if I'm doing this right, but I got a decent result at the end. So I just took this and started painting it on. As you can see, I already did some on this piece, and then I'm just adding a little bit more, and it goes on here just thick and flows right into all of the recesses. Now, before it dried, I took a cotton pad and wiped a lot of the excess off. I don't know if I should have waited for this to dry or not, but this worked out pretty well. Then after it did dry for a few minutes, I put some of these spirits on a Q-tip, and then was a little more deliberate in what I was wiping off here and making sure that I only had the grime look where I wanted it. And it worked out really well. I am super happy with this compared to using like an acrylic wash, and I'm definitely going to use this a lot more often. Here I'm doing it on the whole side of the body, and then I do the same process after that, where I take the cotton pad and wipe the large amount of it off while it was still wet, and then after it sat for a few minutes and dried, I took the Q-tip to it again and did it a little bit more deliberate, just making sure I don't have any pools where I don't want it, or just areas where it doesn't make sense for it to be. And I love the way this turned out. As you can see here, all the parts are done, and it looks so good. So happy with this. We'll use these over acrylic washes and so many things now. So while that oil was drying, I decided to try making pigments. I got these pastels online, super cheap, just some earth colors. And then I took a bit of screen, put it over this pot. I got this idea from Plasmo, and then just wiped this back and forth until I got a powder. And I mixed these two colors to get it really close to the sand color that I painted on. And man, it was super easy, worked so much cheaper than buying all the pigments. As you can see, managed to get the color super duper close. Very happy. This was super fun to do. Back to the model, I forgot to record me just painting a little bit of black into some of the broken areas to give that kind of charred effect, but just a really light coat of a black glaze. And then I used some silver metallic color to just brush some scratches in there, because it wouldn't be just a solid black coat. It would be a little more damaged. And that added just a really nice detailed look to a lot of these broken spots. And then I also decided to do this on the blaster holes as well, because they were looking a little blah. They needed a little bit more pop to them. I actually took these highlights a little bit too far though, and had to come back with some more black glaze to make it look a little bit more like blaster holes, and I ended up adding a little bit more of a trail by the entry of them. And this was a smart thing. I'm really glad I decided to do this, because it added a lot to the project. Quick side of the body, looking super cool. Not super happy with the chipping, but overall, I'm enjoying this. Now that we've got everything painted, we need to get it glued on to the base. And I'm a little bit on the struggle bus here again, just getting everything into the proper location. You know, it's a lot of just placing things and replacing them and then replacing them until I got them into a spot that I liked. And then once I did have them in a spot that I liked, I just took some thick gel super glue and started gluing it into the base, into the position that I liked. But that definitely was a process, and it took me a few tries to get it where I really did like it. So as you can see, I'm struggling, fiddling around here, but it's nice to include this so that you guys can see that it's me figuring this stuff out as I go along. I am not a professional by any means. This is all new to me as well, and it's super accessible for other people to do too. Just expect to screw up. And you end up with something like this, where it looks super cool. It does look like it's just kind of placed on top of there right now though. So using the same mixture we used before, just a fresh batch of it, I'm gonna go ahead and sort of blend the edges of where the model meets the sand in. And I have to go around and do this in select locations. You don't necessarily need to do this on every single piece, but where the parts are kind of crashing into the sand, you definitely want to blend those in. And then I'm gonna use a brush just to thin out the edges a little bit, blend it into the existing sand. You don't want it to look like little globs of glue on top of that once it dries. The nice part of using a premixed color in the sand is that I can just grab the pot of paint, and then as soon as that glue sand mixture we put down is dry, I can go ahead and paint it so that it blends in. After you paint it with the base color though, you're going to want to put a shade on top of it again just to blend it in with the rest of the sand. And then once you're done with that, it looks like it was always there, and the model blends into the actual diorama piece way better. It's not just sitting on top of the sand like it was before. And here you go. Now we gotta grab those pigments that we made earlier, and I was super excited to do this. I watch a lot of scale modeling channels and they use these pigments all the time, and I've really been wanting to try them. And they're super duper easy to apply. You just grab a little brush. I mean, you could use anything you wanted. I used a brush, and you just sort of dab it on where it makes sense that the dust would go. You know, it's kind of sitting on top of things. It would have splashed up when it crashed. You can go pretty heavy with it. In fact, I would suggest going a lot heavier than you think you need to go with it, because once you do seal it afterwards, you do lose a bit of the effect. If it's not being touched in any case, you could probably just leave it without sealing it, but I knew that I am not gentle with models and it needed to be sealed. This is what it looks like before sealing. And then once I spray it with some alcohol, just a little spritz, it looks like this. Once the alcohol dries out a little bit, it does brighten back up though. Now I needed to make a base, so I was like, hey, I'm gonna make a balsa base. And I painted it all up. So it wasn't working out. It was looking crummy, looking pretty crappy. So next to that, and then I thought maybe if I just sand these edges really smooth, I can paint them black. So I sand them nice and flat, and then I grabbed some spackle to fill in some of the holes, wait for that to dry, and then once that does dry, I gave it another sand again just to get some nice flat edges, as you'll see coming up here. And then I decided afterwards that I would just paint it black, and it looked really good, way better than that crappy balsa base that I was putting together was turning out. So I'm surprised at this. It was much easier, and it does give a nice finished look after it's done. Let that dry, and your diorama is complete. Lots of new stuff for me on this one, lots of firsts, lots of trying new things, making new things, and I had a really good time with it. The result could use some improvements, but overall, I'm really happy. So if you like this video, check out some of my other ones. Maybe throw a subscribe down there. I would really appreciate it. I got some more videos in the works already. Thanks for checking me out.